It's a rehearsal for the ultimate test of survival.
Please, come and help me! Oh!
It's about pushing the limits of space exploration and discovering what it's going to take to put humans on Mars.
Somebody gets killed, maimed.
For 6 weeks, teams of scientists, engineers, and volunteers are living in a 27-foot wide simulated spaceship.
Okay, stand by for checklist.
Transition is now complete.
They're here to endure conditions similar to those astronauts would face on a real voyage.
I think we've used about 2/3 of our oxygen.
And to try out key scientific missions that could reveal whether life ever flourished on Mars. It all takes place high above the Arctic Circle on an uninhabited desert island. The unique geology here, plus the bitterly cold, dry, and dusty climate, and constant sense of danger, make it the place on Earth most like Mars. The goals of this pioneering research: to advance our knowledge, spark our imagination, and bring us closer to someday exploring the inhospitable Red Planet. It's day one on simulated Mars. The first 6-person crew wakes up in its small habitat, or HAB for short.
This was the first night in the HAB. It's been quite an experience, waking up and looking out through the window across the impact crater.
The habitat is perched on the rim of one of the world's largest exposed meteor impact craters. Called the Houghton crater, it's one of the key features that make Devon Island like Mars. And it serves as a spectacular backdrop for both the habitat and its crews.
My name is Frank Schubert. I am a musician, and I work with, among other people, the rock group Devo. I also own a design and construction company in Denver, Colorado.
The crew's first mission is largely to finish setting up the HAB.
Who was in charge of bringing in the spacesuit here? My name is Sam Burbank, and I'm a filmmaker from San Francisco.
Frame for two.
Sam and I are going to go out and do some repairs on the HAB in full suit regalia.
I feel a little better. My name is Darlene Lim, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Toronto. I'm actually doing my PhD in paleolimnology. That's the history of lakes.
I can hear you well, Frank, with the radio too.
Oh, good.
About the fix station, can you check, Darlene, that
Is fix station working?
attach any tools that mount on backpack, belt, straps, etc. I'm Pascal Lee. I'm a planetary scientist at the SETI Institute and NASA Ames Research Center in California. The helmet.
Frank, testing 1, 2, radio check.
Just 2 months earlier, when it was still 40 below zero here and the thin Arctic snow hadn't yet melted, crew members were scrambling to finish building the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station, as it is officially called. The structure is almost exactly the size of the spaceship NASA envisions someday sending to Mars with humans. In fact, some of the people who helped build the habitat were NASA scientists. But this is not an official NASA project.
This research station was built by the Mars Society, an international organization of people around the world committed to getting humans to Mars.
It's a private organization. It has somewhere around 3,000 to 3,500 members. Members of all walks of life. Very few of them are scientists.
This is actually the door for the escape hatch.
Most of them are people that have a passion for exploration of space, and Mars is the next target. They want to be part of it. They want to contribute right from the beginning.
Let's see how he does. Some would like to see Mars settled. Some would simply like to see Mars explored soon with humans. And I'm among the latter group. I don't know about settlement. But what drives me towards Mars right now is the prospect of being able to send humans there to explore this place. And what the Mars Society is trying to do here on Devon Island is to seize the opportunity to promote the idea that it's something that's eminently feasible, but more so eminently desirable.
What is this alien world, millions of miles away from Earth, that so many people desire to visit? This is Mars as actually seen by a satellite orbiter. It looks inviting from a distance, but in fact, it's a freezing cold desert. Mars lacks the oxygen we need to breathe, and its thin carbon dioxide atmosphere is at such low pressure, if you were standing unprotected at the surface, your blood would boil away. The thin atmosphere also allows intense penetration of the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Levels can reach 1,000 times of what we get on Earth. And Mars is home to some of the most violent dust storms in our solar system. They last from days to months, sometimes enveloping half the planet with corrosive soil that piles up in thick, potentially dangerous dunes. But Mars also has an inescapable allure. Ever since our first spacecraft traveled there in the 1960s, we've known that the planet was covered with canyons and valleys, evidence that water or ice once flowed all over the planet, much like on our own Earth. The most recent high-resolution photos reveal gullies that look as if they were created by water just yesterday. All these water-formed features suggest there could have been life on Mars in the past, and it might even still be there. Finding past or present life on Mars would tell us that life on Earth is not unique. So just for the sake of knowledge, there's a strong reason for sending humans to explore Mars. But there's another compelling argument for undertaking this challenge.
It's necessary to embrace challenge. Civilizations are like people. They grow when they're challenged. They stagnate when they're not. And they decay when they become societies that shun challenge. The question of exploring Mars is really about us.
Right now, space agencies around the world are planning to send more than a dozen spacecraft to Mars over the next decade. These machines will expand our knowledge of the planet and identify places worth exploring in greater detail. And humans could soon follow, according to NASA Administrator Dan Golden.
We just put out a request for information for a Mars reconnaissance orbiter. It will find the landing spots, not just for the robots, but for the astronauts. And in no less than 10, and certainly no more than 20 years, we'll start writing history again. Let's burn it into our brains that in our lifetimes, we will extend the reach of this human species onto other planets.
It's an exciting vision, putting humans on Mars. But there's one major roadblock standing in the way.
NASA right now does not have either a presidential mandate or congressional approval to send humans to Mars. Before NASA gets a formal commitment, it must be able to say what it will actually take to put together a human mission to Mars. And there are some areas where there are still many unknowns. And so what we're doing here is not so much putting together a human mission to Mars as much as learning how to plan for one. Okay, step 3, donning the backpack.
Every phase of exploration begins with a ragtag phase. I mean, the exploration of the moon began with Warner von Braun and a few of his friends, helped on by some science fiction writers. The exploration of Antarctica began with a ragtag group of eccentric explorers.
It takes a few enthusiasts to fire up everybody else to get things moving.
Okay, guys ready to go?
Yep.
As they venture out onto Mars for the first time, crew number 1 is hopeful their simulation will in fact help get things moving.
The first phase is a very special phase.
We're going to let them go out the door in about 5 seconds over.
We are setting up the stage for simulations that will, over time, increase in fidelity.
Okay, thank you, Fix One.
We go to Mars for a variety of reasons, but once we get there, the primary thing that we will want to do is to explore.
Okay, thank you.
What's in the way of exploration on Mars? Well, it's the fact that the environment outside is lethal. You have to wear a spacesuit to go outside. You have to do everything in a spacesuit. Imagine that you had to do this yourself. Imagine that you had to live on Mars for 18 months. How would you go about planning that? A trip to Mars is, in some sense, the mother of all camping trips.
Get ready, world. The universe is about to change.
The camping trip is successful only if you plan it right. You will not be able to improvise an 18-month stay at the surface of Mars. And so what we're going to learn here is how to optimize our fieldwork while pretending, if you will, that the environment is lethal.
I'm sorry, Frank. Say that one more time.
I've got the screwdriver I need in my pocket.
So let me go for it there.
I can't see.
No, I get it. This is obviously the way to do it.
So these are the rules that we are going to follow. First of all, we cannot go outside without a spacesuit to do any of our planned activities or tasks. On Mars, the only habitable environment that you can live in is inside the habitat. Outside, you're faced with death. Once we're outdoors, we're going to assume that we have 3 hours of oxygen in our backpack, which includes 30 minutes of, you shouldn't touch it, safety margin, and another 3 hours of oxygen on our ATVs.
Okay, so I think we've used about 2/3 of our oxygen on this trip.
So what would happen if you stay out longer than the amount of oxygen you have? In principle, you die and therefore disappear out of the simulation. On Mars, one of the most important resources will be water. And while we think that there is water available on Mars in some form, we probably will not be counting on it on the early missions. The total amount of water that we have per day will be 30 gallons. And for 7 people, that's very little. We need to have some experience with keeping track of all these things. And in so doing, we will learn how to do Mars effectively and efficiently.
I tell you, everything does take a little longer here.
Much like real astronauts would do if they had just landed on the frigid Martian surface, the first simulation crew has to complete the installation of systems before even thinking about going out to explore. The task here is to connect up a series of long hoses to bring those 30 gallons of fresh water from a nearby stream each day, and also remove wastewater. The hope is to learn important lessons with every activity.
10 minutes to do this. I love it.
Now, what we're interested in here is in constructive criticism. Bear in mind one thing, though, is that the suit is not meant to be comfortable or easy to work in. It's, on the contrary, supposed to be there to bother you and be in your face. So, with that in mind, why don't you go ahead, Frank?
Well, the fogging was probably the biggest problem. It was like it was raining in there. There was water on it, so...
Okay, so fogging, that's an issue, all right. Sounds good.
One thing we noticed that working together, you can't see your pockets. So it was easier for me to get stuff out of Sam's pocket and him to get stuff out of my pockets.
Okay, we got it. Go ahead.
It just has to stay on there,
That's
yeah?
about as tight as you get it, huh?
One thing we talked about is maybe putting a little mirror
Right, that's
on
what regular suits have on
Yeah.
the space shuttle program.
Okay, Frank, you can give me a high five for that one. That's awesome. Absolutely.
After a successful day's work, it's time for relaxation and a space food-like meal. On future extravehicular activities, or EVAs, the crew will begin exploring the incredible Mars-like world that awaits them outside the habitat.
Devon Island is the largest uninhabited island on our planet. We've been coming up here for the past 5 years now as part of the NASA Houghton Mars project. It's an international collaboration between, above all, NASA Ames Research Center and the SETI Institute. You have geologists here, biologists, computer scientists, roboticists, people who design spacesuits and life support systems. We come here to learn how to explore Mars, to learn how to compare the Earth and Mars, to learn from the differences and the similarities between our two worlds. This, in some sense, is a miniature Mars. It's Mars Park.
Among the most striking similarities between Devon Island and Mars are the water and ice-carved gullies that line the cliffs here. By studying these, scientists hope to understand the formation of Martian gullies, which look eerily similar. But that's just the beginning of the uncanny parallels between Mars and Devon Island.
The place is cold, barren, mostly unvegetated, windy, dusty, and when you're here you get this profound sense that you could be wandering across one of the plains of Mars, one of the rocky plains that were visited by the Viking landers, for example. We see impact craters, ancient hot springs here, ancient lake beds like the one that you see behind me, and also canyons and valleys around the crater. All of these features in this high Arctic desert look like features that we see on Mars. In addition to studying the geology and the biology of this place, we are also running a program in exploration research. We're trying to understand how to explore other planets, and Mars in particular, better with robots and one day humans.
One key activity here on Devon Island, besides the Mars Society habitat, is helping in the development of a Mars spacesuit.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over. Roger, understand, go for landing. You're looking great.
Until now, the farthest humans have ever ventured away from Earth has been the Moon. The spacesuits we used during the Apollo missions were like big, overinflated balloons, not great for mobility. And after 3 days, the longest time astronauts ever spent on the Moon, lunar dust was clogging up the spacesuit joints. By contrast, a Mars suit will have to be highly mobile and last for 18 months of active fieldwork, or else the mission could be a failure. Over the years, NASA has conducted some basic research on a Mars suit. But without the budget to send humans to Mars, NASA has to focus on other things.
All right, what we're going to do, you're on the field today.
In part, that's why spacesuit maker Hamilton Sundstrand is investing its own money to work on Devon Island.
This spacesuit represents our best attempt at an engineering model used to look at the interactions between the astronaut and the spacesuit. So we're up here trying to learn what types of things the scientists and geologists might need when they're going out on their EVAs and doing real geology work.
Mars suits will have to be strong and airtight, carry loads of communication gear and oxygen, provide heating and cooling systems, and protect from ultraviolet radiation. Fortunately, things weigh a lot less on Mars.
The gravity on Mars is approximately 1/3 of what it is on the Earth, so something around the range of 145 some odd pounds is what we're looking for to target the weight of a spacesuit, and that would be equivalent to about 50 pounds on Mars.
The hope is to develop a suit that not only keeps astronauts alive, but lets them be productive explorers.
Like in the later lunar adventures on Mars, the suits will be used by geologists. So we have up here is a lot of geologists exploring the crater. And they'll be walking around the suit, and we're trying to find out if the bubble position's correct, if the shoulder positions are correct, see if it hits that display or not, if the different interfaces that we're adding to the suit are going to work out for someone that's a scientist, and be transparent to them at the same time. Don't break the bubble. It's the only one we got. It's very tough to create a suit for Mars because of the environment. We're looking at sharp, jagged rocks. We're looking at a lot of tough things that are braid. And currently, we don't have materials that we think that could last that long for an entire mission without having problems. Bubble's going to withstand a hammerhead. The new computer. If we look at what kind of technology we're going to need to build a spacesuit, we're still a bunch of years off. Dr. Lee, you ready?
Yes, sir.
When they aren't participating in the habitat simulation, scientists here are happy to serve as guinea pigs for all sorts of new spacesuit technology.
See the second time.
Today, Pascal Lee is trying out a voice recognition system that's designed to let astronauts control all their spacesuit computers. Before starting the test, Pascal must train the system to recognize the way his voice sounds inside the spacesuit bubble.
How's your airflow?
Very good.
Good.
The training involves reading a passage from the classic book Treasure Island.
I remember him as if it were yesterday.
As Pascal speaks, the computer stores voice prints for each word or sound he utters.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum.
Basically the black all the way around the screen.
A tiny computer display is mounted on Pascal's glasses once the voice training is over.
Why don't you do a little exploring and we'll take some dictation.
Do a little exploring and we'll take some dictation. Rocks on a slope. Angular gravel. Debris apron.
The idea here is that when you're exploring on Mars, you don't have your hands available to take notes. And so we're experimenting with this concept whereby we would explore and dictate our observations, our comments. Rock formation, similar to that of Fortress, and also similar to that on Haynes Ridge. Many small coral forms. The trouble, of course, we're running into right now is that this voice recognition software is not able yet to pick up all the words.
Houston, we have an interface problem.
It's going to be an iterative process. This is how engineering works. You try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and then one day you try and it works.
I can give you a hard reboot.
It will take years of additional research and $100 million or more until we have a suit that's ready for Mars. The spacesuit work going on at NASA Base Camp is a good start. But over near the crater at the Mars Society habitat, they needed suits this year. And they only had about $1,000 to spend on each one.
What we have here is the pile of spacesuits and helmets that we used on an EVA yesterday. These, of course, for now are not real spacesuits, but they are very nice simulated spacesuits designed by volunteers of the Mars Society. You have the spacesuit itself. You enter it from the rear. You have the backpack with the neck ring. And the backpack contains fans that provide air into the helmet that you wear. And this helmet was designed by the volunteers, ingenious volunteers I should add, of the Mars Society, because look at this. This was once a trash can lid. And then of course we have our simulated EVA gloves. This is a headset that will allow you to communicate with your buddy when you are on an EVA. There are two main reasons why we want to go through the process of wearing a dummy spacesuit, if you will, in doing our field work, as opposed to just going out there and doing it in normal shirt sleeves. This spacesuit is not that easy to put on. It's got many moving parts, and that delays your operations. How much time will it take? What impact will it have on your activities? In other words, you can't just go outside on Mars like you are here on Earth. Not only are you inside a suit, but the suit doesn't allow you to see every part of your body. It doesn't allow you to see every part of the external environment.
There is a constricting factor that's built into the suit that makes it somewhat bulky and uncomfortable. And while it's not what a real suit would really feel like, it will limit the amount of fieldwork we can do. I think there's a very positive and I would say modest message in the fact that we're wearing spacesuits. We're not playing astronauts or pretending we are quite ready to go at this point. This is just part of learning how to do it right.
The story of how the Mars Society's habitat got to the Arctic begins in Denver, Colorado, where the simulated fiberglass spaceship, funded by Discovery Channel, Flashline.com, and others, was designed and first constructed early in the year 2000. Leading the project is Dr. Robert Zubrin, the outspoken president of the Mars Society. In his normal life, Zubrin is an aerospace engineer who spends much of his time developing affordable ideas for getting humans to Mars.
So we're going to be good to fly tomorrow.
Yep, we'll make it fit.
His inventions include a machine that can turn the Martian carbon dioxide atmosphere into rocket fuel, and a life support backpack that could make unlimited oxygen from the thin Martian air. Zubrin's passion for seeing humans go to Mars someday led him and the Mars Society to construct the simulated spaceship. The idea was to land it where it could help expand the Mars research NASA was already conducting. But getting it up to the Arctic was no easy feat.
When it came time to see how we could help the Mars Society ship parts for the